Since you're recording now, we'll call the meeting to order at 13:08. If you could do the roll call, Caitlin, please.
Alan Dale,
Present.
Larry Davis,
Present.
Linda Dixon,
Present.
Amy Domaretsky,
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm present.
Paul Emerson,
Present.
Chris Garretts,
Present.
Nancy Gucci,
Present.
Andrew Henry,
Present.
Ken Hunsberger,
Present.
Matthew Yarnig,
Present.
Lauren Jones, Jeff Morose, proxy for Ian McDonald,
Present.
and Jeff Morose again,
Present.
Alex Piggott,
Present.
Vaughn Salt, and George Schneider,
Present.
John Sapoulis,
Present.
Emily Stahl, present, Linda Vanendrishi,
Present.
Brian Whitwell,
Present.
and Linda Vanendrishi, proxy for Phil Wilson.
Present.
And we have quorum, Chair.
And that is good. I am hosting as your chair my first virtual meeting. I did call in yesterday to make sure everything worked, and it was all working perfect, eh, Caitlin? And today we got some IT issues, and that's too bad. So I've got a couple opening remarks here. First of all, we're losing a couple members. Bill Unger, who has been the economic rep for business and industry since 2007, is no longer going to be with us. He hasn't decided to come back. Bill Strauss, I don't believe Bill is here today. Are you, Bill? Hearing silence. He's been our public interest rep since July 2012 up until this month, and he too is leaving us. And Peter Ryder from the city of Guelph, as I mentioned last meeting, is no longer with us. Now, we do have two new people who have joined us today. Nancy Gutscher from Public Interest. Nancy, can you wave your hand there? Is there anything you would like to say in your first meeting?
Well, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity. In my day job, I work at the University of Waterloo's Water Institute as a knowledge mobilization specialist. So I've also been working in the world of water for over 15 years. So what I hope to be able to bring is a good understanding of some of the science that is happening at the University of Waterloo and elsewhere, as well as a good knowledge and network of source protection and water policy in general. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Nancy. The next new person that we have is actually replacing Peter Ryder from the city of Guelph, Emily Stahl. Emily, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've come a bit full circle on this committee. I just had to look up the date that I sat where Caitlin and Sherry were sitting in 2012 and 2010, between 2010 and 2012, doing the first assessment reports and the source protection plans. And I'm now sitting here today as the City of Guelph representative. My job right now is the manager of technical services at the Guelph Water Utility. So we are doing a little bit of a restructure with Peter's retirement, and the official risk management official position is going to fall to my position. So that's why I'm sitting here today and into the future. whoever is in this chair will also become part of this committee. So excited to be back, excited to be sitting around this table and see actually some familiar faces, which is also very cool. So nice to see everybody.
Thank you very much, Monica. The next thing I would like to introduce is a news release from the Ontario government, and it was released on November 25th, so it's relatively new. Ontario introducing legislation to protect communities from forest wildfire fires and hazardous gas wells. And this new bill will also enable the use of carbon storage technology. Now today, being November 25th, the Ontario government introduced legislation that, if passed, would help communities reduce the risk and impacts of wildfire fires and hazardous oil and gas wells. The Resource Management and Safety Act would also help attract more land surveyors to the professionals to support building more homes and other infrastructure that would enable and regulate the use of carbon storage technology. As part of this legislation, the Ontario government is also proposing a new act that would support innovation and help to manage emissions, the Geological Carbon Storage Act. If this is passed, it would enable the regulation of commercial scale geological carbon storage, which involves injecting captured CO2 that would otherwise be emitted into the atmosphere and injecting it into deep underground rock formations for permanent storage. Right now, this advanced technology would help energy-intensive industries reduce greenhouse gas emissions by roughly 5 to 7 million tons per year, create upwards to 4,000 short-term jobs, and reduce the price Ontario industries pay for carbon by close to $1 billion a year. The ministry will continue to work with stakeholders and Indigenous communities to refine the proposed frameworks for these ongoing projects. Right now, worldwide, there are about 400 carbon capture and storage projects at various stages of development worldwide in 2023, and close to 300 billion tons of CO2 that has already been injected underground. We've mentioned this at a prior meeting or two. If you'd like to read that updated legislation, or it's just been introduced, not passed yet, I know Sherry will send you a copy. I found it interesting reading, and it's certainly applicable to our interest with respect to water in Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Moving on in our agenda updates, Source Protection Authority Liaison. I don't believe Dusty from Catfish Creek is here today. If I'm wrong, Dusty, speak up. Hearing silence, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Monica Lemke, I think I saw your name there somewhere earlier, Monica. Can you wave and give us an update, please?
Hi there. My only update is that the ministry is still working on a reply to the question about what tools can be applied to the swim facilities question. That was posed on the June 20th, 2024 meeting, and a reply is forthcoming. That's all I've got.
Thank you very much, Monica. Does anyone have any questions of Monica? Seeing no hands or nobody yelling at me, we'll move on. Conservation Ontario, Leslie Rich. Is Leslie here?
Yes, I am.
You're on, Leslie.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Just a few updates from Conservation Ontario today. So first of all, our Fall Water Wednesday social media campaign has wrapped up. So just a thank you to those who shared it on their social networks. And work will start on the winter campaign, so please stay tuned for more information in 2025 about that social media campaign. We've also been working to prepare for our upcoming project manager meeting next Wednesdays. Sherry and some other project managers are part of a working group that have helped create the agenda. And so this particular meeting will focus on prescribed instruments in the Section 34 amendment process. And it will include some presentations from MECP staff and then a great opportunity for us to discuss in smaller working groups and larger working groups, what we have learned through that conversation. I also wanted to tell you about a working group that we've established to respectfully commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Walkerton water contamination event. So I want to stress that we're in the very early stages of planning and we're still doing outreach. But the tentative project will be entitled Celebrating 25 Years of Source Protection in Ontario. So we are proposing the development of a short YouTube video that will serve to remind and reflect on the events that took place in Walkerton and the subsequent response. And in addition to that short video, we're going to be extracting some teaser clips that will be used as part of a social media campaign to promote the good work that is being done in source protection, as well as the YouTube video more generally. So as I said, we are in the early stages of planning, but we are aiming to have this campaign ready, obviously, for the May 2025 anniversary date. Just generally from a Conservation Ontario perspective, we will be hosting our December meeting of council on December 9th. And for those of you who may not be familiar, this is where conservation authorities have the opportunity to come together, all 36, and to receive updates from Conservation Ontario in a council format. And then finally, with this being, I think, our last SBC meeting of the year, I just wanted to wish everybody all the best for the end of the year, and also all the best for fulfilling and happy and healthy 2025. And I think I personally, whenever I come to the end of the year, I like to reflect on the good work that we've done. And I want to thank all of you for the work that you guys do to protect our sources of drinking water. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leslie. Does anyone have any questions of Leslie? Seeing none or hearing none, we'll move on. We have a resolution here that the agenda of the November 28th, 2024 be approved as distributed. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please.
Move, Andrew.
Andrew's moving and Chris Giras is seconding. I'll call the question. Anybody opposed, wave your hand so I can see you. Nobody waving their hand, so we'll accept that as being a carried motion. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interests. Does anybody have anything they would like to declare? Hearing silence, we'll move on. The minutes of the previous meeting, everyone's had a chance to read them, I trust. So I have a resolution here that the minutes of the previous meeting for October 24th, 2024 be approved as circulated. Looking for a mover and a seconder, please.
Larry Davis will move.
Larry Davis will move. John Septis, you're going to second. Thank you, John. Thank you, Larry. I'll call the question. Anybody opposed, wave their hand. Don't see anybody waving a hand. We'll say that's carried. Moving right on, we have two pieces of correspondence. Number one is the Lake Erie Source Protection Committee to the Honorable Todd McCarthy, Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, regarding Section 36 Prescribed Instrument Policy Amendment for Trent Conservation Coalition Source Protection Plan, dated November the 6th, 2024. And B, Conservation Ontario to the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks Environment Policy Branch regarding comments on ERO posting number 019-9196, enabling greater beneficial reuse of excess soil dated November the 12th, 2024. Looking for the mover and a seconder for the following resolution, that the correspondence from November 28th, 2024 be received as information. A mover and a seconder, please. A mover and a seconder, please. Linda Van Deers, please, and George Schmeider. Thank you, George and Linda. I'll call the question. Anybody that's opposed, if they could wave their hand. And seeing none, we'll announce that too is carried. Thank you. Moving on to number 11, reports in our agenda. Sherry, you're on to talk to us about SPC 241101 Source Protection Program update.
Thank you, Chair. So a pretty short update this month. So you've already heard from the chair a number of member changes. This month, Lake Erie Region Management Committee is also reviewing applications to fill our 2 vacant economic sector seats. And that'll be for individuals representing business and industry. So we hope to bring new appointees into the committee in the new year. Other updates, our implementation working group has continued to meet monthly. As well, in November, we held a policy discussion session focused on road salts. So we talked about the policy implications for the threats related to road salt. So the application of road salt, the handling and storage of road salt, as well as the storage of snow. Some municipalities are currently reviewing their road salt related policies, and we will be bringing an update to the SPC on any changes to our policy approaches that will move forward through the Section 36 updates. That's expected to come in January. And then finally, just a quick update on our timelines. We are continuing to work through our Section 36 updates for Long Point Region and the Grand. So right now, the Long Point Region package is going through early engagement with MECP, and we're waiting for comments on that. And municipalities continue to work through the final revisions to the Grand. And so as we work through that, we are bringing policy approaches to the SPC, as you'll see listed in the report. So this meeting, Caitlin will be presenting on agricultural related policies, and then the final prescribed threat policies will be the road salt in January. And as you will be aware, we also have 3 Section 34 amendments currently going through consultation. So at this meeting today, we're bringing forward the City of Hamilton amendment to release for public consultation. And the Branch and Brantford amendments will be moving forward in the new year. And that's the end of that report.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Are there any questions of Sherry? I'm not hearing anything, and I'm not seeing any hands being waved, so I guess you did a real good report, Sherry. Thank you. I do have this resolution that report SPC 241101 Source Protection Program Update be received as information. Looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Paul Emerson and Linda Dixon. Thank you very much, Paul and Linda. Anybody opposed, wave their hands or yell at me? Seeing none, we'll say that is carried. Caitlin, you're a busy person today. Caitlin's going to talk to us about SPC 241102, Section 34, an amendment to the Grand River Assessment Report, Source Protection Plan, City of Hamilton and Linden Rural Settlement Area. Caitlin, all yours.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed Section 34 amendment that's discussed in your report includes the incorporation of the replacement well at the Linden Communal Well System in the City of Hamilton, and that is to replace a well that has been decommissioned. So the details of the technical work and the revisions to the policies to align with the 2021 technical rules were presented to the committee in September and October.
The text and map edits were made to reflect the new replacement well, and there was no new significant drinking water threat activities identified. The majority of the previously enumerated threats were determined not to be present. So text edits were also made to the source protection plan policies, and that was to align with the 2021 technical rules. Interim policy revisions to address those rules were specifically noted, and the consultation on the final policy approaches is still ongoing as part of the Section 36 update to the Grand River Source Protection Plan. And in addition to that, there were new and revised policies for significant, moderate, and low liquid hydrocarbon pipeline threats. So the SPC released these amendments back in October for pre-consultation. There was a 19-day consultation period held for implementing bodies from October 28th to November 15th. And as required by regulation, the SPC has to consider all of the pre-consultation comments that are received during this period before releasing the amendment for public consultation. So through your report, I can confirm there were no comments during the pre-consultation period. So there were no additional changes made to the assessment report or the source protection plan for this amendment since your October report. The Section 34 also does require the Source Protection Authority to obtain a municipal council resolution from any affected municipalities in support of the amendments prior to going to public consultation. So a supporting council resolution was received from the City of Hamilton on November 15th. So the next steps for this amendment is there is a public consultation period planned for December. Any comments that are received during that public consultation, along with any revisions that are made, will be brought back to the SPC for consideration at the January 30th meeting. And that is it for the report.
Thank you, Caitlin. Any questions of Caitlin? Seeing or hearing none, I have two resolutions here that I ask that you consider that report SPC 251102, Section 34, Amendment to the Grand River Assessment Report and Source Protection Plan, City of Hamilton, Linden Rural Settlement Area be received for information, and that the Lake Erie Resource Source Protection Committee release the Section 34 amendment to the Grand River Assessment Report and Source Protection Plan for public consultation. Those are the two resolutions. Did everybody understand them, or does somebody like me to reread them? They are outlined in our agenda. Again, seeing nobody waving their hands, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Alan Dale and Amy are our movers and seconders. Thank you, Alan and Amy. Any discussion further? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Anybody opposed, please raise their hand. Seeing none, we'll say that is carried. But we're not going to let Caitlin off the hook easy. Caitlin, you're back. Caitlin will talk to us. About, I don't know whether I'm still here. Oh, I see she's going to put a screen up. She's going to talk to us about draft policies and approaches for agriculture subsets, SPC 241103, Section 36. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully my screen is sharing okay. Can I just get a nod from anybody? Perfect. Okay, so this presentation is a summary of the report for the policy approaches for agricultural subthreats. In December 2021, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks updated the technical rules for assessing source protection vulnerability and risks under the Clean Water Act. So updates to assessment reports and source protection plans now require technical work and policies to align with the 2021 rules, as there are new and revised subthreat categories and threat circumstances, and there are some vulnerable areas where threats can occur have expanded. So Lake Erie Region staff, in collaboration with the Implementation Working Group, have initiated a policy review to identify the implications of these changes for the Section 36 updates to the Long Point Region and Grand River Source Protection Plans. The focus of this review is to address the 2021 rules, but it's also to address any policy gaps, to achieve consistency, align with provincial regulatory frameworks, reduce edit burden, and to address any implementation challenges. So this report before you outlines the outcome of this policy development and review exercise and the proposed policy approaches for the following agricultural subthreats that are outlined in Table 1 of your report. So the application of agricultural source material, or ASM, storage of ASM, application of non-agricultural source material, or NASM, handling and storage of NASM, application of commercial fertilizer, handling and storage of commercial fertilizer, application of pesticides, handling and storage of pesticides, livestock grazing or pasturing, and outdoor confinement areas and farm animal yards. So as shown in the table here, some of these subthreats are regulated under the Nutrient Management Act through a prescribed instrument, and some are not. These prescribed instruments include nutrient management plans, nutrient management strategies, and NASM plans. So the 2021 technical rules have resulted in amended threat circumstances for some of these threats. But for these following subthreat categories, there have been no changes that have resulted from the 2021 technical rules. So there are no plan-wide Section 36 policy revisions proposed as a result of the threat circumstances for the storage of ASM, the application of pesticides, livestock grazing or pasturing, and outdoor confinement areas or farm animal yards. However, we are planning some plan-wide Section 36 policy revisions for these subthreats in order to address implementation challenges and to better align with the Nutrient Management Act regulatory framework, which I'm going to discuss a little bit later on in the presentation. So Table 2 of your report outlines the changes that were made to the agricultural subthreats as a result of the 2021 technical rules and describes the policy implications to be addressed as part of the Section 36 updates. So this includes technical rule changes to the threat circumstances for application of ASM, application of NASM, handling and storage of NASM, application of commercial fertilizer, handling and storage of commercial fertilizer, and the handling and storage of pesticides. Oops. So the policy implications for the 2021 technical rule changes. One of the first changes was the updates to managed land percentage and livestock density. So for the application of ASM and the application of NASM and the application of commercial fertilizer, all the threat circumstances for those subthreats rely on the managed land percentage and the livestock density. So those MLLD calculations must now be completed using the 2021 technical rules. So the implications of that is that this may impact the number of significant threats. And so there may be a need for new or revised policies in order to address any gaps. The second technical rule change is that there was a category, or the NASM categories were clarified in the threat circumstances. So the application of NASM and handling and storage of NASM threat circumstances now list the type of NASM category, so either 1, 2, or 3. And this is to better align with the Nutrient Management Act. The implications of this threat clarification is that Category 1 NASM does not require a NASM plan under the Nutrient Management Act, unlike categories 2 and 3. So other policy tools that are not a prescribed instrument are required to capture this category 1 NASM threats. And then the third change that's highlighted in Table 2 of the report is that there were threat circumstances that were simplified or broadened. So for handling and storage of commercial fertilizer and the handling and storage of pesticides, these threat circumstances were simplified to focus on the sites where this handling and storage might occur, and also to capture commercial fertilizer and pesticides in any form. So the implications of that is that if there are policies that are listing very specific chemicals, those may need to adopt more generic language in order to broaden the applicability. And there may be a need for some revised policy approaches just to address the fact that there may be an increase in the number of significant threats due to these simplified circumstances. So the preferred policy approach across Lake Erie region has been to use existing legislation and prescribed instruments wherever possible. So this is especially the case where a provincial ministry directly approves a prescribed instrument and conducts inspections and compliance enforcement. But additional policies to complement prescribed instruments offers the most protection because there are cases where there are agricultural threat activities that cannot be effectively addressed through the prescribed instrument under the Nutrient Management Act. So such instances of this include where a prescribed instrument is not required for the activity. So for example, if the farm does not meet the criteria to be phased in under the Nutrient Management Act, Category 1 NASM, as I just explained, and then livestock grazing or pasturing. And in some cases, the instrument is required. However, the process is proponent driven and there's limited to no provincial oversight. So this includes all nutrient management plans for application of ASM and commercial fertilizer, but also some nutrient management strategies if the activity meets a legislative exemption. So for example, if there's an existing ASM storage with no new construction involved, or Category 2 NASM that has a metal content rated CM1. So additional policy tools, generally when we speak about additional tools, we're referring to Part 4 policies, are already in place for these activities that are not regulated under the Nutrient Management Act. So for example, there are already Part 4 policies in our plans for application of pesticides, or for where farms are not phased in under the Nutrient Management Act. But as part of the Section 36 update, these other tools or Part 4 policies are going to be expanded to include these regulatory exemptions that I just spoke of that make the prescribed instrument ineffective. So this is just an example on the screen here of a prescribed instrument policy and a Part 4 policy, and they're designed to work in tandem in order to capture all of the nuances of the Nutrient Management Act that I just spoke about. And they're written for where a prescribed instrument does or does not apply, or where it is approved or not approved by OMAFRA. So for the current and proposed approaches for agricultural threats, current policy approaches for agricultural threats are tailored to the local needs of each municipality, and this is given that agricultural activities vary considerably between rural and urban areas, and the presence of existing threats is really dependent on the land use within the vulnerable areas. But there are some consistencies across Lake Erie region, and those are highlighted in Table 3 of your report. So the policy review, including input from IWG, has indicated that these common approaches are mostly effective, but there are some gaps, and that is just due to those unique nuances of the Nutrient Management Act, as I just mentioned. So for our proposed approaches under the Section 36 updates, we will be focusing on closing those regulatory gaps and ensure that there are additional policy tools in place for agricultural threats that can't be managed effectively with the prescribed instrument. So for Part 4 prohibition, we are proposing to continue to apply that as per our current approach. But we are also proposing an additional approach that wherever the prescribed instrument policy is asking OMAFRA to prohibit an activity, then in that case, we can add a Part 4 prohibition, and that will be used to capture any of the situations where OMAFRA does not approve the prescribed instrument. And then for Part 4 risk management plans, same as prohibition, so we'll continue to apply them as per the current approach. But then we're just proposing to also add an additional approach where the prescribed instrument policy requires OMAFRA to incorporate terms and conditions into a PI. That's where we could add a Part 4 risk management plan, and that would be able to capture any of those situations where OMAFRA does not issue the prescribed instrument. And that would include revising risk management plan policy wording so that it also applies to phased-in farms and not just the not phased-in farms. And then for prescribed instruments, the current approach has been to apply this to activities that are regulated under the Nutrient Management Act for farms that are phased in. So what we're proposing is a revised approach that we would apply this to activities that are subject to a nutrient management strategy or a NASM plan that is reviewed and approved by OMAFRA only. And we would revise the policy wording to clarify that. So we would not be applying prescribed instruments for any of those proponent-driven nutrient management plans for application of ASM or the application of commercial fertilizer. So in summary, the general policy approach for agricultural threats is to apply Part 4 and prescribed instrument tools in the way that best aligns with the Nutrient Management Act. So the policies would be applied based on what OMAFRA's level of responsibility is, instead of referring to just phased in or not phased in farms. And we would be using the prescribed instrument whenever OMAFRA has direct oversight. And then in general, we're, as always, prohibiting in a general way, not for everyone, but mostly across the region, the application of ASM and NASM in the WAPA-A to be prohibited. And that aligns with the Nutrient Management Act. And as I mentioned before, existing and future threats, whether or not they're going to be managed or prohibited is really based on the type of agricultural activity, the alignment with the Nutrient Management Act, and the vulnerability vulnerability score of the area. And then education and outreach will continue to be used as a supplementary tool or for larger nitrate ICA areas. So we've heard so far with our policy review discussions with IWG that municipalities are generally supportive of adopting these plan-wide changes for the Section 36 updates where it's appropriate or where it makes sense to do so. But as always, policy development in Lake Erie region is municipally driven, so there may be a local need to update policies to address specific gaps or unique implementation concerns. And so we've included Appendix A in your report to highlight these municipal specific changes. This is a very high level summary of what is being proposed to date. This committee will have the opportunity to review actual policy text edits at future meetings. So this is just a very quick summary of that Appendix A that you have before you in your report. It kind of highlights not a lot of details, so I encourage you to refer to the Appendix A for details of the policy changes. But it does show the types of policy revisions that municipalities are proposing at this stage in the process. So some of them will be proposing a change in their approach, and generally this means switching from either a prohibition to a manage or a manage to a prohibition. In some cases, they will be maintaining that approach, but they do want to revise the applicability of the policy. So for example, they might be adding a threshold to the policy to change where it will apply. And then in some cases, the policy itself is not changing at all, but they are expanding it to include additional vulnerable areas that were not captured before. Some policies are going to be proposed for removal if they've been identified as redundant or ineffective and no longer needed. And then there will be also new policies being put forward, mostly to address policy gaps and implementation challenges, as I already mentioned. So next steps for the Section 36 updates. Lake Erie Region staff will continue to work with municipalities very closely on updating the policies and refining that final wording. And we will bring those policy revisions back to the SPC at a future meeting as we move through the Section 36 update process for Long Point Region and the Grand River. And that is the end of my report.
Again, thank you, Caitlin. Does anyone have, Paul, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I'm just wondering, life is a balance, and this is really good. I think, I'm sure, from a water protection point of view, which we're here for. But I'd be curious to know what Larry Davis has to say about some of these things, in that he's a OFA rep, and he'd be much more familiar with the nuances of this than I would as a non-farmer. Is that all right, Mr. Chair?
We'll ask Larry if he'd like to comment. Larry, do you have a comment?
Oh, there. Am I still on mute?
No, you're good.
You're good now, Larry. The floor is yours.
I think we lost him.
It would appear we have.
Yeah.
Caitlin, do you see him at all?
I do
Looks
not.
like he's gone.
He probably did what I would do, is when he was hitting the button to unmute himself, hit the wrong button, and he's out. He's probably gonna sign back in here.
We'll give him a minute, Paul. Does anyone else have any questions of Caitlin? Yes, Alan, you got your hand up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Caitlin. I was going to go in a different direction. I was thinking about a number of years ago, we had a property down at the lake. There wasn't a farm property, but it was a storage of commercial fertilizer. And so I'm just thinking about those types of properties that aren't rural or agricultural. They don't have a nutrient management plan or nutrient management strategy. But I just want to make sure that those types of properties are still covered under prohibition or management or Part 4 regulation if they start to, if they're new or if they're expanding and they are the storage of NASMs and commercial fertilizer. I just want to make sure those ones are still captured, because we had a real concern with one property, and I'd hate to see more of them develop without us having policies in place to manage them. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair. That is the goal of the Section 36 updates to the policies, is to have the dual mirrored policy so that they cover all of those scenarios. So the goal is to word them in a way that if an activity is considered a significant threat, but it's not subject to a prescribed instrument, or OMAFA is not reviewing that prescribed instrument, then there is another policy in place, which is typically Part 4, risk management plans or prohibition. And that would be triggered in the absence of any prescribed instrument being in place or being approved. So the short answer to that is yes, our goal is to have those policies in place to cover those scenarios.
Perfect. Thanks for confirming that.
Has Larry returned yet?
Oh, I see him just joining, actually, so he might be popping back on.
Perfect. You saved me.
Hi, Larry.
Larry,
Sorry
you've got
about
the
that.
floor.
Yeah, you hit the wrong button, and first thing you know, you're out completely. Sorry. So yeah, this is all concerning to me, but I mean, this is a proposal that's been put to us. So between me and Linda, I think I guess I have to accept it. So hear me?
We hear you, Larry. Paul, do you have any specific questions you want to ask?
Not really. I just was I saw all this big long list of things and I think to myself, well, it's probably, I'm sure it is, really good.
It is problematic, yes, but I mean, I'm dealing with one right now, actually, with a NASM and whatnot and storage, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is almost beyond what I can do as a farmer, and then it costs me a lot of money to get this job done. So, the MOE is helping guide me through this. So as long as they're willing to help, then we'll get through it as farmers, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of coming from. You know, I worked in government all my life, as I think a few around the table here did. And I was on the environmental side and new regulations, and we were implementing them all the time. But there are times that, while well-meaning in their own right, they have to look at a bigger picture too, rules do. Because we can quickly layer on all kinds of rules on everything and create almost gridlock in our society, sometimes to our own detriment. So I just was curious what a farmer and someone representing the farmers, how this impacts them, and are there other solutions that would be more practical? That's where my mind was at. To some of these things.
Thank you, Paul and Larry. Then I think we've covered that. Any other questions of Caitlin at all? Seeing none or hearing none, I do have a resolution that SPC 241103, Section 36, Draft Policy Approaches for Agriculture Sub-threats be received for information. Looking for a mover and a seconder, please.
Mr. Chairman, before you could, I saw Sherry's hand up. I think she wanted to comment before the resolution, maybe.
I'm sorry, Sherry, I didn't see it.
No problem. So through you, Chair, I just wanted to add, we're happy to hear your concerns in more detail, especially as the policy wording comes forward at a future meeting. But I did just want to point out there is within the regulation the possibility for an exemption where there is a prescribed instrument in place. The proponent can provide a notice to the risk management official that provides them with that detail and would exempt them from needing a risk management plan. What we've seen throughout Lake Erie region is that that is not used very often, but it is there as an option. So what we're proposing, the exemption would still stand for anyone who wanted to pursue that, but we're trying to just sort of cover the gap where some of these things might not be getting captured and where our previous policy was not effective. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Sherry. Paul, any more questions at all, or? Okay, anybody else have any questions of Caitlin or Sherry? Seeing none, I have read the resolution. Looking for a mover and a seconder, please. John, thank you for moving, and seconder, Linda, thank you. Anybody opposed? Wave your hands, do something. Seeing none, I think we're all good on that one. Moving on, business arising from previous meetings, Local agri threat request under Technical Rule 119. Discussion has been referred to the Lake Erie Region IWG for further consideration, and that's ongoing. There is no update. MECP response to SPC concerns regarding Part 4 policy implications for stormwater management subthreats 2.3 and 2.4 report SPC 240605 draft policy approaches for sewage subthreats. That too is ongoing, no update. And lastly, SPC requests for staff report regarding the importation of excess soil in wellhead protection areas. That is ongoing, and the staff will be targeting the January 30th SPC meeting to provide a report. There is no other business. I have no closed meeting needs. As just mentioned, our next meeting is on January the 30th at 1 o'clock. I don't believe that's been determined whether it's going to be a hybrid or virtual or in person. Any comments there, Sherry?
It will be virtual. Just given the nature of January and the weather. We'll meet virtually again, and for March, we will reassess whether we want to pursue a hybrid meeting.
Thanks very much, Sherry. So before I call for a motion to adjourn, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out today. I hope you have a great month ahead and have lots of fun with family and friends. Having said that, a mover to adjourn, please. And Chris, I got you down for that. Thank you, Andrew. We're good. That's it. I hope I didn't rush this meeting through too quickly, but all's good. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Everyone.
Thanks. Take care. We'll see you in the new year.